In this little video, I'll give you a short insight into how I get sharp and noise-free images, and we'll focus on the sharpening of the image. If you process an image from a raw file, what you'll usually do, you do some pre-sharpening in Lightroom, Camera Raw, or whatever software you use. Then you do your main processing to contrasts and color, and in the end you do the output sharpening for print or web. In my start to finish tutorial, which I recorded nearly 2 years ago, I show you my complete workflow and also how I do the sharpening. And while most of my workflow is still very similar to this tutorial, there's one change I made. In the start to finish tutorial, what I do here in Lightroom, I also have an image which I blend, and I set the sharpening to 0. This is a good approach if you want to blend images, because having this sharpening at 0 will remove any sharpening fringes or artifacts. Then I export the photos and do the blending on the very unprocessed file. And after this, I was exporting this blended image again, pulling it back into Lightroom, and then I do the pre-sharpening to a value around between 25 or 50 normally. But this has now changed a bit, especially since I acquired the Nik plugins, and I'll show you what I mean in a short time. At first, now what I'm doing, I still have the sharpening in Lightroom very low at the beginning. I set it to a value between 0 and 10 usually, so I nearly get no sharpening, no pre-sharpening on those files. So you see those images, they look a little bit soft, but this is no problem. Usually the pre-sharpening will remedy this. But I'll export the photos with sharpening set to such a low value, and then I'll work like in my start to finish tutorial. I do the blending. For example, you see here I have 3 exposures for dynamic range. Then I have a few exposures without lens flares and for focus stacking. And I'll export those as TIFF files and bring them over into Photoshop. And in Photoshop, I'll do the blending of those photos, which results in this image. And this blended image, this one is still unsharpened, so looks a bit soft. What I could do now, I could now do the pre-sharpening and then go on with my other processing. But what you need to know, all the other processing steps you do, which is often contrast adjustments, color adjustments, mostly the contrast adjustments will also influence the sharpness of the image. So if you have, for example, already little sharpening artifacts from the pre-sharpening in your photo, and you then do harsh processing, this processing can further change or bring out those artifacts, and this is something you might not want. So what I'm now doing, I'm doing all my processing, so the contrast color work and micro contrast work, on this still unsharpened image. And this leads me to an image that looks like this, for example. This photo now would be my final processed image, which is now ready for pre-sharpening. So right only at the end, just before the output sharpening, I'll use the pre-sharpening to give the photo the little details which it was missing. And you could now export this one as TIFF and pull it over into Lightroom and do the pre-sharpening there. But what I like to do, since I purchased the Nik FX stuff, the Nik plugins, I use the raw pre-sharpener from Nik. And this one is really great. I don't have to go over to another software. I do it right out of Photoshop. And this pre-sharpener, you see, gives me the little details. And I don't need those right from the beginning. It's perfectly okay to use this pre-sharpening at the end of your processing. click OK. Usually I leave everything as it is in the Pre-Sharpener. This will give me a separate layer here, and now I can get in closely at around 100% and adjust the opacity of this layer. And what I also can do, I can put a mask on this layer, and with a black screen with a black brush, 100%, I can mask out the sky, for example. And now I'd flatten the image and move over to output sharpening. And if you're interested, for example, in how I do the print sharpening, there's another YouTube video I have here where I show this. And this workflow really makes sure that you get sharp images without too much additional noise from pre-sharpening and processing.